Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to do some basic editing on your phone using VSCO without using presets. This skill is great for knowing what a generic image needs before the application of a preset. Now it is worth noting, although the version of the VSCO app that you are seeing is the premium version, the tools that we're going to be working with today are the ones that you can use in the free version. So let's get straight to it. Firstly, open up the VSCO app and select from your gallery which image you would like to edit. As you can see, I have got a few images in my studio area and we're just going to pick a generic image to edit. We'll edit this one. This is my nan's Irish setter. She's called Hetty. She's very lovely. So let's go through the tools that we will be using today. When you first open your image in VSCO, you'll see all of the free presets you can use, but we aren't going to be using any of them today. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your images pop without presets, which is a great skill to have if you want to find out what will work best for you if you have a particular style and a look that you want to achieve in the future with your images. I should say that when you edit an image, it can be so subjective. So how I edit an image might not be how someone else does, or it might not match their style of editing. So I'm trying to keep things as basic as possible here so you can gain the tools needed to make those editing decisions yourself. So let's move along to the Tools tab. The tools that we will be using today are Exposure, Contrast, Adjustment, Sharpen, Saturation, Tone, White Balance, Skin Tone and Clarity. I do have the premium version of VSCO, so I do have a few extra tools here, which are the borders and the HSL, but I'll come to that in another video soon. So firstly, exposure. Usually your phone will be quite good at exposing an image for you already. I know that on my phone I have the Huawei P20 Pro. I can manually adjust the exposure of my image whilst taking a photo. I do find general phone images to be a little bit dull and flat, so I do like to bump up the exposure. So as you can see here, the difference that exposure does to your image. VSCO has got quite a good exposure kind of system in place, whereas I find other image editing apps, I think maybe the built-in one in Instagram isn't that good. At least I don't think it is that good. So we're just going to bump up the exposure just a touch on here. Now onto contrast. I like to use contrast to give my images a little bit more punch to them. As said before, I feel like phone images can sometimes look a little flat, so giving the image a little boost of contrast just gives it a bit of oomph. As you can see already, if I go fully up, it's a bit much, and if I go fully out, you can see what difference it makes. So I'm just gonna boost it just ever so slightly, and as you can see already, the difference, it's a bit more clear, it's got a bit more punch to it. Adjustment. So adjusting or aligning is usually one of the very first things I do to an image and make sure that the horizon line is straight. Or if you have a person in your image, I like to make sure that either their eye line or shoulders are straight, and those are both great ways to tell if your image is a bit wonky. I obviously don't have a person in this, I just have a lovely dog. So I'm just trying my best to align the horizon, which I think is almost perfect, I think. Also, as you can see, we have the option to skew our image just here. What this does is changes the horizontal and vertical lines of your image, and this is great if you're taking photos with lots of lines in, so buildings, documents, product boxes, and even taking flat lay images. So perhaps you haven't angled your phone quite right, maybe you haven't got it straight down. This is good for correcting that, but please note that it will skew your subject, whatever that may be, quite a bit, so keep that in mind when you're taking the image. Let's see what they do. So as you can see, quite vast changes that it can do. We have different crop options here as well. We have the standard Instagram crop of a 1:1 or the square crop. My phone takes images in the 3:4 aspect ratio, so there's a crop for that. And the other main crop that you will want to use is the 9x16, which is perfect for Instagram stories. I might crop my image in a little bit. Just to give it a bit more eye-pleasing alignment. For an image like this, I would either have my subject in the middle of the bottom lower third, like this, or at the bottom lower right where the lines intersect, like this. But that's just down to personal preference. Now if we move along to the sharpening tool, I like to sharpen my images a little, as it gives just that little bit extra of clarity to an image. You don't want too much sharpness in an image, otherwise it can look a little odd, as you can see here. We're getting these weird lines and squares everywhere, which we don't want, so just the touch. Now let's move on to saturation. As you can see, we can go both ways down the spectrum of saturation. We can desaturate and saturate, and once again I'll add a little bit of saturation. And even though we've only made a few slight changes, the difference in the images from the before and the after looked a lot nicer, and we haven't even added a preset yet. Let's move on to tone. Now tone controls your highlights and your shadows. You want to adjust your highlights if you have an image that is bathed in harsh sunlight. It just helps soften those parts of the images that are overexposed. But still, as you can see here, it was an overcast day, so there is no harsh sunlight. But as you can see, it does help soften where the light is coming from, which is, in this case, is the clouds. Adjusting the shadows is great for when you want to bring out those darker tones in your image out a bit. For example, if you are in a shadow, using this will help lighten those darker colours. Now I think my image here is good for both highlights and shadows. I might soften the clouds just a touch and bring out the shadows just a bit as well. White balance. Now your phone is usually quite good at keeping a neutral colour balance, so you'll rarely have to adjust this. The only time I would is if I was changing between environments and my phone hadn't time to adjust automatically, or if I was in an environment with lots of green, purple, blue or yellow. So if you were in a forest or at the beach. Now this image looks quite balanced already, so I don't think I'm going to change much. I might warm it up a touch, just a touch. And as you can see, the difference again, and we haven't added a preset, and there's so much colour, so much clarity, and it really makes the image pop. Now skin tone really does what it says on the tin. It changes your skin tone. I find this tool usually adjusts the red, yellow and orange tones in an image, and as you can see here, it changes the hues both ways. So see, we've got a much more purpley orange tone, and then it goes a bit more green. Now, as we haven't really got any skin colour in this, I'm just going to leave it at 0. Now, clarity also does what it says on the tin. I wouldn't say I like to use too much of this tool, as I feel if you use too much, it can give your image that HDR, high dynamic range look to your image, which is great if that's the look you want to go for, but for basic adjustments like this, we're only going to use it to give us a little boost. So here is it looking at full capacity. Yes, it makes the clouds look amazing, but everything below that, it makes it look a bit odd. So I'm just going to do the slightest bit. Now for the rest of the tools today, the vignette, grain and fade and split tone, I often find that they are not really used for basic adjustments, but I'll just dabble in them. Now for vignette, I often feel like there is a time and a place for vignette. This would be best used for darker images or an image where you wanted to focus on the subject of your image. For an image like this that I'm using today, I wouldn't use it, as there's no point and it can look a bit unnatural, as you can see here. There's just nothing that would make that dark naturally around the edges. This would be good in darker environments, maybe a forest or a cave, if ever you were to stumble in a cave. Now onto grain. I personally like to add a little bit of grain to an image as it gives it a more filmic look, but this is just down to personal preference. Remember, image editing, like art, is very subjective. So I think I shall just add a little bit. And now, as you can see, it does go quite up the scale, but I think I just want to maybe do 1.5. Now fade, along with a vignette and grain, is a more stylistic choice of edit rather than a basic adjustment. So I use these sparingly when I'm adjusting or colour correcting an image. But as you can see, it fades your image. Haha. Now lastly, split tone. Again, split tone is more of a stylistic choice of editing rather than adjusting, so I won't be using it in an example with you today. But what it does, you can control your shadows and your highlights. And I think that just about covers it. And look at the difference. A bit bland, and then we have a lovely pop of colour and a bit more clarity in our image. When you know basic editing skills, you can make your images stand out without using a stylistic preset. And once you have these skills, you can apply them for when you're using your presets, so you can get the look that you want for your images. I hope that you have enjoyed today's tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.